And your subterranean clover, it's not what it used to be.
Subterranean clover captured our imagination a few years ago. I went on a trip to Australia, into Victoria, Melbourne, and then up to Adelaide to look at varieties with a company that we do some business with. And I saw these absolutely fantastic bracky type subterranean clovers that were growing up around my knees with leaves the size of, like the bottom of a stubby for a reference point, even larger. And I thought, these are fantastic. We need these varieties in New Zealand. So I investigated and interrogated the plant breeder, Carolyn de Koning, in Adelaide, and she was extremely useful, and she told us all of the things we needed to know about introduction of, managing and maintaining a stand of subclover, of a bracky subclover. The variety that we imported is called Antas.
Most people think of subclover and they think of a leaf that's about the same size as Maku lotus and very, very low to the ground.
Yeah, so you're talking about there, Rob, Mount Barker, which was introduced like over 100 years ago. In fact, 2 years ago we had the guys over here and they said, well, look, he met a descendant of the farmer who'd originally produced the Mount Barker line of subclover from Mount Barker, near Adelaide. But Mount Barker is a very small, low-growing subclover, and its success, its survival, has been pretty much attributed to the fact that it has a very low growing point, and it flowers, seeds, and then the burrs they bury. Stock were unable to graze all of the flowers or all of the burrs. Unlike the more recently bred subclovers, they have a higher growing point, more flowers, and of course stock absolutely love the legume. They love protein, So of course they would graze the flowers, and of course regeneration is not as straightforward.
So what do you do for regeneration?
Well, it's quite straightforward, really. I was talking to Dick Lucas this morning, and he said, look, I've looked at a farm that we've got who's in the Sustainable Farming Fund in Cheviot, Koromiko Farm, and he said, look, I need to get Hugh Crosley to get his stock off because, they're grazing. So really simple. Unfortunately, you have to remove the stock any time from about late September, early October, through until the middle of December, to allow the subclover to run, to allow it to flower, to allow it to produce a seed, a burr, and consequently a seed. Now, some of the varieties of subclover, there are 3 family groups. So there's the bracky. The attribute with the brachycalcinium subclover is it will grow up to your knees with very large leaves, but the flowering points are halfway up the plant, so about 12, 14, 18 inches up the plant. So they're well in the grazing zone. The Yaninikum variety and the subterranean varieties both bury their seeds 100%, as long as you don't graze them. So their flowering point, they grow along the ground, and so the burrs will bury much easier, much easier. So, it's easier to seed the Yaninikum and the subterranean. But the bracky variety, of course, gives you huge dry matter and, of course, a lot of feed in the spring.
Palatability?
Enormous palatability. Stock absolutely love protein. I spend a lot of time on farms, particularly sheep and beef farms, occasionally dairy farms, well, quite a few dairy farms, but particularly with sheep. You follow sheep walking around a paddock, not that it's a habit, but and you do see them nibbling, and they're going specifically for the legume. Derek Moot at Lincoln University will say, animals, sheep in particular, preferentially graze the legume.
It looks to me, well, very much like red clover, really.
It does look like a red clover. I mean, the number one difference is that it is an annual. It's an annual. Red clover is a perennial, so it will last for up to 5 years, sometimes 3 years, but up to 5 years for red clover. Annual clovers, subterranean clover belongs to the annual family. Its survival is reliant absolutely, completely on the variety's ability to produce seed and to shed seed over Christmas, over the December period, either by burying the burrs. Each burr will contain about 4 or 5 seeds, or simply dropping the burr on the surface of the soil, and then with the little undulations on the burr type structure, burying itself. And so that's how it gains its capacity to survive. But in any given year, subclover regeneration will only be 5 to 10% of the seed shed and buried and burred. These modern varieties, they can, in Australia, where they harvest them, in the dry, friable country, they can harvest about 1,000, 1,500 kilos of seed to the hectare. We own the variety which was bred at Whata by Gavin Sheath. We harvested 1,100 kilos to the hectare out at Lincoln, So they're big yields, they can yield really well.
Establishment?
Establishment really straightforward. This year, unfortunately, in fact, for the last 2 or 3 years, we've had the drought in the east coast, north and south Canterbury around about. So establishment hasn't been so straightforward. But what is interesting, Rob, is that, of course, the subclover, it hasn't died because it hasn't grown. A proportion has grown, say 5-10% might have struck with the rains in January, then just burnt off and died. But the seed is still in the ground, waiting for a useful rain after Christmas next year.
Availability?
Really available, as Vincent has already said, we don't like to run out of seeds, so we have lots of stock, so it's in plentiful supply here in Rangiora.
So how do people get hold of it?
They get hold of it by tracking to our website or looking us up in the phone book, and ringing us. For those old-fashioned people, those people who are not so digitally enhanced, not with a dial, of course. But anyway, just ring us up and we can visit and provide you with subclover seed and the advice, the agronomy to go along with managing the crop.
Yeah, that's important.
It's very important. It's important. One of the things that we've been working with, I will confess, it did. We're a little bit old-fashioned here, 1932, but Dick Lucas and Derek Moot would lecture you and say, look, you absolutely must reduce your grass down to 5-10 kilos to the hectare. So, it used to be very difficult to sell 25 kilos of grass to the hectare, but it's equally as difficult to get a farmer to reduce their grass sowing down to 10 kilos to the hectare. But we sow 10 kilos of grass plus 10 kilos of subclover to the hectare, and look, establishment is a piece of cake, plus white clover, red clover, chicory, plantain.
And of course it's a legume.
It produces its own nitrogen. You need to attend to the P, and particularly sulphur. Phosphate and sulphur are important with the legume. But yeah, so tremendous plants. People that grow them absolutely love them.